Okay, good morning, everybody. I think just coming up for 11:05. So I think we'll kick off. Mary, you're still on the call, and you can admit people as they join the webinar as we go along. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for participating this morning. So you're all very welcome to the third of our webinar series on the Sustainable Energy Communities programme. We've had a great take up to the series so far, and we welcome you all today, and we've had over 50 people registered for the event this morning, which is great. My name's Alex Hamilton, and I'm the Senior Engineer with Three Counties Energy Agency, and we are the Regional Coordinator for the South East SEC programme, and we work on behalf of SEAI. So I'll be chairing today's event. This is the third of our 4 webinars, which we've been running over the last couple of weeks. Today's webinar is about grants, and Yvonne Byrne is going to be presenting. She's going to be talking about the various grants that are available to community groups. Next week's event will be covering funding opportunities, and that's the last part of our webinar series. We've got a guest speaker next week, Roisin Mulligan from Clan Credo, and she's going to answer your questions on the Community Climate Action Loans. So the difference between today really and next week is today's about the grants programmes, and next week is about other funding opportunities. So in other words, how do you as a community raise the funds that you require to match the grants? Because in general, the grants don't cover 100% of the work, so you also need to raise some of your own funds. So that's what next week is about. So just some housekeeping for the webinar this morning, please. So to help everyone get the most out of today's session, we will have the presentation first, and then we're going to have some time at the end to answer some questions. But to help ensure that there's good sound quality for everybody, all the attendees are going to be muted throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, there's a chat section on the Zoom call here on the meeting. So if you can just type up your question into that chat, and at the end of the presentation, then we'll go through all of the questions one by one. Just to also let you all know, we're recording this webinar series. We're recording today's webinar, and that's so that anybody who couldn't attend this morning's session can obviously watch back, and also yourselves, you can take the recording and watch it and share it with your own communities, anybody who can't attend today's meeting. So you're all very welcome, and I'm going to hand you over now to Yvonne Byrne. Yvonne is our SEC Mentor for County Waterford, and she's going to talk to you through the grants programme and explain what's involved and what kind of supports are available for your community. So I'll hand over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everyone, and lovely to see you, albeit virtually, this morning. And yeah, you're all very welcome, and many thanks for giving up your time to listen in. What I want to talk about, as Alex said, is grants. What I've noticed working in rural development for the last 20+ years is that communities, individuals, towns, villages that have got very good at knowing the grant timelines and also knowing how to prepare the right paperwork for grants have managed to really strategically benefit economically, socially, environmentally their areas as a result. So it's definitely a little bit of a skill, and for those areas that have got it really well perfected, it can make a significant difference. So what I hope to do this morning is just share some information around the grants and hopefully give you some advice that will be useful and help you in terms of making your grant applications successful. So in terms of the objectives for this morning's sessions, really twofold. One, to give you an overview of what grants and funding is available for energy efficiency, renewable energy initiatives. It's by no means going to be all of them, but it will be an overview of the ones that I see most commonly availed of by communities in the Southeast. And then the next part of my presentation, I just want to go through what typically makes a good application and what I often see in terms of the elements and that make some areas, villages, towns successful. So we're going to start off by just giving an overview of the different grants that are available. Sustainable Energy Authority Ireland, SEAI, They have specific grants for energy efficiency, renewable energy programs, so I want to cover those. I then want to look at the larger grants. So the ones I'm going to focus on is LEADER, Town and Village Renewal, and then the Rural Regeneration and Development Fund. I'll give a quick overview of the community grants. So ones that I see groups most use is the, it's often shorthand called ORIS, the Outdoor Recreation Infrastructure Grant. That would be particularly good for things around the sustainable transport, cycling, walking, Community Enhancement Programme, Environment Action Fund, and FLAG. For the farming grants, there may be people here who represent the farming sector. I'm not going to go into any detail around the farming grants, but I do just want to draw people's attention to the TAMs too, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one. And then the final piece is business grants. Again, I'm not going to be covering that in any detail in this session, but I do want to make people aware that if you are a business and if you're interested in environmental grants for your business, then do look up that email address and put in your queries. Go to the telephone and ask. And again, the 3 grant programs that SEAI run is the Exceed Certified Program, the Accelerated Capital Allowance, or the Renewable Heat. There's a lot more information available about them online. Have a look if you're a business and you think that could be relevant to you. And then, as I say, follow it up if you want to take it further. Okay, so the first grant that I want to look at is the Better Energy Communities Grant, or often referred to as the BEC grant program. So it's administered by SEAI. Again, just because of the time constraints for this morning, for people that are interested, do go to the web address. You'll see that I have it at the top right-hand part of the screen. So if this looks relevant to you, I recommend that after the webinar, go to that web link, and that will give you fuller information. The key information around the BEC grant is that it's not for a single entity, it's for a collaboration or a partnership. So if a village or a town was interested in applying for the BEC grant, you might have the community group who manage the community centre applying for works in their community centre, matched with, say, housing. So maybe there's some older housing in the village that need retrofitting. It could also then be linked to the school or a business. What they have is different grant percentages for the different entities, and that can all be packaged into the one grant application. So typically for previous years, we've yet to have the grant percentages announced for later this year, but going on previous track record, community facilities, clubs, charities would be at the 50% rate. And then the private sector, so businesses, private homes, hotels, would be the 30% rate. Again, we'll wait to see what it's announced, but that just gives you an indicative level of what grants are available. The other really important thing to be aware of for the BEC grant is that if you're applying for a building to have works done to improve the energy efficiency or to put in renewable energy initiatives, you need to have an energy audit completed first. So that's something you would have to do in advance of being able to submit your grant application. Alex, who chairs this session this morning, is very familiar with the BEC grant. So again, if there's any particular questions on that, she'll answer those at the end. But the key things to remember is that it's a partnership, so it's not a single entity, and that you do need to have done an energy audit first, and that it can be a mix of community and business. The type of measures that the BEC grant can fund is basically anything to do with energy. So it's an environmental grant. So insulation, upgrades to LED lightings or lighting controls, heat pumps, solar water heating, window door replacements, solar PV, electricity. The timelines, this is something that's really, really important for anyone that's interested in this grant. These are indicative, so we'll have to wait and see. And I think there's going to be some announcements quite soon on this. This is what we're expecting, is that it could be open online this November, that the application deadline is likely to be around January 2021. The letter of offer would then typically go out around March, April 2021, and projects would need to be completed by next October. Do remember, these are only indicative dates based on previous years, so we're waiting to hear the exact timelines for this. The key point really is, if this is of interest to you, then you need to get an energy audit done immediately to be then ready for when the applications open. If it's of interest, the key follow-on steps is, as Alex was saying, there's county mentors in each county in the southeast region. So I would be over the Waterford region, Fiona over the Wexford region, Therese over the Kilkenny, and Marina over the Carlow. So get in contact with us and we can advise you further. Also, a range of grants that may be of interest to people through SEAI is the individual homeowner grants. So this is very different to the BC grants I've just talked about. This is for the likes of you or me, any individual who is a homeowner who wants to do upgrades to their home. So again, I have the web address at the top there for anyone who's interested, but I just want to give a quick profile of the type of grants that are available. So insulation grants. The house has to have been built before 2006. There's a range of grants. So attic insulation might be around €400, for example, and then dry lining, external wall insulation will be slightly higher amounts. They vary the grants depending on the type of home as well. So again, you're best off going to the website and it's all very clearly laid out there. The next one is heat pump grants. That's for people who are wanting to typically replace their old oil boiler with a heat pump. Again, you have to have lived in the house for a certain period of time and have built before a certain period. And they do recommend that it has to be well insulated and also be airtight, because otherwise the heat pumps don't work very effectively. The next one is the solar electricity grants. This is for installing solar PVs on the top of your roof. Again, the houses have to be built before 2011. And the address there, if you want to look it up in more detail, is on the website there. Again, the levels of grants varies according to the number of solar PVs that you're going to be putting in. Typically, it's capped at around 2,400 for the solar PVs. So very different now. This is another grant, the LEADER program. Many of you may be familiar with this grant program. This is run on a county basis. So Wexford Local Development in Wexford, Waterford LEADER Partnership down in County Waterford, comparable companies in Carlow and Kilkenny. This LEADER program is an EU grant and it's run in 6-year phases. So the current LEADER program is 2014 to 2020. So we're very close to the end of this current program. If it's of interest to people listening in this morning, then I would recommend talk to the project officer in your county to find out if there's any funding left, and if so, in which measure. The other questions would be, when is the new LEADER program likely to be coming on stream, and do they have any indication as to the type of initiatives and supports it might be available? Just to give you an idea about it, because LEADER has certainly made a massive impact across the southeast region for communities, individuals, businesses. There's different percentage grants. So if you were a community, for example, it's a 75% grant. It can be up to as much as 90% for a community if you're in a disadvantaged area and you're going under what they call the basic services measure. So there's different percentages. If you were a business, it's a 50% grant. Again, your project officer in the LEADER would talk you through all of this. The maximum grant is up to 200,000 for capital. Where you see on the table analysis and development, that's typically feasibility studies or research, and that's up to 30,000. And again, there's different percentages for community or business. In terms of what it can fund in the environmental field, I looked up the case studies, and again, you can look them up online. biodiversity plans, planting of hedgerows, managing wildflower meadows. So a lot around biodiversity in the environmental piece. There would also be funding for businesses. So there was a company in Wicklow who got funding to develop his business in how to these. And then finally, many community centres over the last, since I think 91, Leader's been going, have been upgraded through the Leader programme, and that could be replacement doors, windows, extensions to modern building standards, replacement heating systems, better lighting controls and so on. So it's a really valuable grant programme, whether that's at a business level, community level. And so certainly if it's something of interest, get an understanding of what, if any, funding is left under this current round and when the new programme might be coming on stream. This is the town and village renewal scheme. This is something I've been quite involved with over the last number of years. It's from the Department of Rural and Community Development, but it's administered by each local authority. It's been an annual grant programme. So we've just had the 2020 programme and the submission of applications up to the department, and those results are pending. The key to this programme is really it's around the holistic development of villages and towns in the region. So it would be capped at settlements of 10,000 and under. So it's not for the likes of Waterford City, for example, but certainly many of the villages and towns in this region would be eligible. Let's go on. Just to give you a sense of the grants and what's actually available, the norm is that it's capped at 100,000. There is exceptions to that. So each year, 1 or 2 villages or towns are allowed to come in at the regional level of 200,000 if they make a strategic difference. It's an 80% grant normally. This year, it was actually a 90% grant because of COVID-19 and the recognition of the difficulty for communities to raise the matching funds. So it's a really good grant in that perspective. The remaining, if we just look at the 80% model, the remaining 20% matching funds can be made up of 10% voluntary labour valued at €14 an hour and 10% cash that the community have to raise themselves. The timelines got changed for this year because of all the disruptions around COVID. If I give you what's the norm, again, what I would be recommending is that you need to keep an eye out for it for next year, early next year, to see what the timeline is. But typically it's announced around April, May time, and then the deadline is the end of June. And then you would hear whether you've been successful around October time. As I said, each local authority is responsible for the administration of it. So they will advertise the grant programme on the website, county council websites, in the local papers. Some counties advertise it differently in terms of some counties advertise it early to create expressions of interest. So it is really important that you get familiar with the procedure in your particular county to see how to get involved. It is very much around the holistic development of rural communities. So in other words, it's looking at the economic. That could be anything from digital working hubs in community centres to social enterprise, community cafes, to websites and online trading for a village or a town. It can also look at social facilities. So that could be looking at playgrounds, walking tracks, heritage interpretation panels, restoration of heritage buildings. There is an environmental component. So again, you could include things like solar PV panels and heaters onto your community centre. You could include getting energy audits paid for through the town and village. That would then enable you to then go on to the BEC grant that I spoke about earlier. So it also looks at healthy communities. So again, fitness and supporting us with every angle and dimension of the villages and towns in our area. Each year, they do tend to have a specific focus. So as you can imagine, this year was very much on economic regeneration and response to COVID-19 and the challenges that it posed. In previous years, it might have been public realm, for example, and how our villages and towns look. Okay, different grant again is the Rural Regeneration and Development Fund. This is a large grant, so the minimum here is £500,000. It applies to the same catchment or cohort of groups, i.e. populations of less than 10,000. So again, the smaller villages and towns in our region. It's a very significant grant. It has to be led by a state agency, but they like it to be done in partnership with community and the business sector. What I've seen in the last couple of proposals that I've been involved with in the Southeast region is that very much this whole transition to a low carbon economy, climate change mitigation needs to be brought in to any application that might be prepared under this Rural Regeneration and Development Fund. So that could be if you're looking at how do people access this new facility that you might be setting up through this grant. Are you looking at electric vehicle charging points? Are you looking at the bicycle infrastructure? Are you looking at sustainable transport modes? Are you thinking about energy efficiency works if it's retrofitting to existing buildings? Are you looking at renewable energy heating systems, again, whether that's retrofit or new? And if you're doing new design buildings, whether that's extensions or complete new builds, making sure it's to best energy standards, NZ, near zero energy buildings, for example. So that's an important component of this grant scheme. And I'm seeing it increasingly in grant programs that this whole, I suppose, climate change emergency needs to be brought into everything that we're doing. For people who are interested, as I say, I recommend go to the website link there for more information. The next screen that you see here is at the other end of the spectrum. These are the much smaller grants typically that I would see communities availing of. And there's 4 that I've listed here. So I'll just go through those quickly. The ORIS grant, the Outdoor Recreation Infrastructure Scheme, that is managed by local authorities. It's an annual grant program typically, and it's for the creation and maintenance of walking trails and also cycling trails. So again, it fits very nicely if you're a sustainable energy community around sustainable transport. It could be looking at trying to create access points between your village and maybe a tourism facility that's just outside your village, whether that's a walking trail or the coast. There would be the example, for example, of Blackwater Village in County Wexford, where their village is typically about 4 or 5 kilometres away from the coast. So what they got ORIS funding for was the creation of a safe walking trail from the village to the beach to reduce the number of cars that might be driving to access the beach and coastal facilities. So it's that type of thinking that the ORIS is very good for. There's 3 measures within the ORIS grant. They call them measure 1, 2 and 3. There's different grant amounts available under each measure. So measure 1 would be the 20,000. Measure 2 is up to 200,000. And then measure 3 is up to £500,000. The Community Enhancement Programme, that again is managed by local authorities. It's typically a smallish grant, and it's a lovely grant for communities who may wish to avail of immediate capital improvements. And again, you could apply for things like, say, bicycle racks if you wanted to go down the sustainable transport. It might be to do with solar PVs. It could be to do with new chairs and new equipment in a community centre. So there's a wide range of things. And again, they'll have specific guidelines as to what they can't and can't fund. So the key is to read the details and see what applies to you. The FLAG programme, I don't know how many people here would be familiar with that programme. It's a Coastal Communities European grant programme. It's for villages and towns, typically within 10 kilometers of the coast. Because it's a European program, it's similar to the leader, where the time period is 2014 to 2020. So it's coming near to the end of its current tranche. For people who are interested in it, if you go to the Bordish Gamara BIM website, they manage that grant program. They will give you more details on what's available. And yeah, I recommend you follow it up. And the key questions, I suppose, are, is there any funding left under the current program? And what are the details and timelines for the new program, and if that's available at the moment? The final one I just want to draw your attention to on this slide then is the Environment Action Fund. That's a small grant typically managed by local authorities, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, whatever, for small scale environmental works. If you go on to the websites, you can see the list of projects that have been previously funded to give you an idea of what gets grants and whether that matches the type of projects you have. Where I find useful information comes up for those who might not be familiar with them is the PPN network. If you're not registered, I'd strongly advise that you get your group to be registered with the PPN network, because they'll give you the most up-to-date information on these grants as they become available. And the Wheel website has a lot of, I was just having a look at it, has a lot of guidance around preparing grant applications as well. Okay, so just very quickly on the TAMs too, I'm not going to go into the detail, but I just wanted to capture it here. It's open to the 31st of December of this year, and it's for the farming community, and there's lots of things available, whether that's LED lighting or solar PVs, etc. So if any of you are involved in farming or know of people who are involved in farming, certainly this slide and the link to the agriculture.gov website is the place for you. Okay, so what makes a successful application? The key is around the research. What are your needs? So things like energy audits, energy master plans, and I've spoken a little about that. Energy audits you need to have for the BEC grants. Energy master plans is something we've been covering in the last webinar series. Communities complete energy master plans, and that gives them all the detailed information around your energy consumption, the profile of whether you're using a lot of coal, oil, gas, renewables, etc. That gives you key information to feed into any grant application. Another way of finding out what your needs are is public consultation. A lot of grant applications will ask you, how have you identified your need? That's obviously pretty difficult at the moment with the COVID. You're not going to be holding public meetings. The recommendation I'd have there is to go for things like online Survey Monkeys, for example, is probably the most effective way of gathering information. Feedback from government agencies, making sure that what you're applying for matches government strategies, whether that's the climate action plan, whether it's age friendly, looking at supports for older people, whether it's the county development plan, etc. Interviews, so again, I'd be recommending doing phone interviews at the moment rather than face-to-face. Site visits are an invaluable way of looking at your village or town and seeing what's needed. Again, to be done with care and caution at the moment, and but that's a useful way of visually seeing immediately what's needed. And I suppose the key that I just put in the bubble at the bottom is what resources are underdeveloped that you can then develop to their better potential through a grant application. Other places to get statistics. So again, your energy master plan, if you've one completed. If you don't have one completed but want one, then I recommend you sign up to the Sustainable Energy Communities Programme. That will give you 100% grant funding for a consultant to do that research on your behalf. And then you get that data. Energy audits are another key area. The Three Counties Energy Agency and local authorities have a favourable rate for communities to apply for energy audits. I was just talking to Alex at the beginning here before we started. Typically for community groups who want energy audits done on buildings, it can be anywhere between 400 and 1,200 for a particular building. Other places that I would go to get data is the CSO website and the POBL website. They have excellent maps, small area maps, and you can go right in and drill down to your electoral division or your small area map and pick up really useful data like what type of heating systems and the housing profile, the age of the housing in your area. Do people have access to cars? Do people have access to broadband? What's the age demographics of people in your area? Level of unemployment and so on. So that's key information you can build into any grant application. What to apply for. So people obviously think about the capital elements to grant applications, but what I'd also be suggesting is do look at the feasibility studies, the research piece, training, marketing, and the employment schemes. All of those form invaluable components for your village or town. And when to apply for grants and what information do you need? Typically, when a grant gets announced, there might only be 4 weeks of an opening period, for example, and often they may require evidence of planning permission, evidence of a lease or land title ownership, procurement possibly, and evidence of matching funds, i.e. have you got money in the bank to match the grant. Each grant has different requirements, so you do need to look at those carefully. But if they do require, and certainly say things like LEADER or the town and village renewal do, planning permission or evidence of lease or ownership, those aren't documents that you can get quickly. They can take up to 3-6 months to get. So that's something that you need to be ready way in advance of any grant application actually going in. And the bit that I've highlighted in the box at the bottom, I suppose, is be ready and know your grant deadlines that you want to aim for, you know, for say 2021, and then make sure you've got the relevant documentations in place in advance of those. And then making sure you match the criteria. You may be familiar with the grants, but the criteria can change each year. So just have a look at them carefully and make sure you angle your projects to best meet what the priorities are in the different funding organisations. I'd also recommend share best practice. So if you want to go for a BEC grant or a LEADER grant or town and village, see if there's any areas, communities, businesses in your area that have been successful in getting that grant in the past, and maybe chat to them and find out how they did it, and any sharing of best practice or tips they would give you. Another one that I find really useful is go onto the websites of the particular grants and look at examples of grants that have been successful in the past. That gives you usually a great range of projects that you can see that funder has supported, and you can match up your project against that. The next one is writing skills. Strongly recommend you try and choose someone who writes grant applications, who likes writing. That always helps. And maybe getting someone else to do a final proof of it at the end. It might be helpful to nominate one person in your community group to do the grant applications, because there's a bit of a skill and over time they can get really good at it. And the final piece then is making sure that you match the government objectives. So in your grant applications, make reference to the local economic and community plan and how you deliver on achieving their objectives in your grant application, or it could be the climate action plan, or it could be the age-friendly strategy, or whatever it might be. Okay, cash flow, just looking at that, that's something I suppose that's only a problem if you're successful with your grant application, which is then obviously a good complaint. Just making sure you've got enough funding lined up, whether that's through your own fundraising, Clan Credo, credit unions, community finance. Our webinar next week will cover this in more detail, so I won't go into that too greatly. But just to be aware, there can be delays sometimes in drawing down phases of different grants, which can put financial pressure on community groups, and just to be aware of that from the outset. Common difficulties with grant applications: tight deadlines. That's probably the one I see most often, and the need to have specific information at the time of application that maybe takes longer than the deadline requires. Matching your objectives with the funder's priorities. The key documents, so your title deeds, planning, consent, so that might be if you're in a SAC, as a special area of conservation, or you've got a heritage building, for example. Getting the matching funds, that is particularly difficult at the moment with COVID and all the difficulties communities have around matching, raising the matching funds. Hopefully we'll give you some tips next week. And then writing clearly and concisely. This is a list of the key requirements. Each grant will vary, so some of these might not require all of them. I won't go through them in detail. I'm conscious of time for time and want to leave some time for questions, but that just gives you an overview of the type of documents that might be required. Measuring success. A lot of grant applications will look for how do you measure success, and the type of phrasing you often see is outputs, outcomes, and targets. So I'll go through that a bit more detail in the next slide. Okay, so I just want to talk through a case study. This is Blackwater Village in County Wexford. So you can see the photograph at the top is the before, and then the photograph at the bottom is the after. They were successful in securing a number of grants, Town and Village for 200,000, and also the BEC grant with the Three Counties Energy Agency. So their key tasks were they got an energy audit done, they renovated the community centre, which included external wall insulation, replacement doors, windows, new roof, renewable energy heating system through solar PVs. You can't actually see the solar PVs in the photo at the bottom, they're on the other side of the building. So just looking through then what language they would have used, the output there is a refurbished community centre, and I think we all agree it looks a fabulous centre and it's a really lovely addition to their village. And then the outcome measurements would be a reduction in CO2 emissions or reduced heating costs or a warmer and more comfortable community centre. And you could go on, increase the number of people using the facility, reduce social isolation, etc. So that just gives you an idea of outputs, outcomes, and I suppose what difference can be made through managing a series of grants in a rural community. So in summary, timing and preparation is everything. If you want to go on and apply for grants, start looking now at the Q4 2020 and the 2021 grant programs. Know the deadlines, keep an eye on the websites, assess what funds are most likely to benefit you. They do all have different grant percentages, so have a look at that. Foster a relationship with the grant organisation, build a positive track record, make sure you look at the score sheets for your application and match that. Ensure you have all the right paperwork, and I suppose just keep managing the paperwork, and that applies even when you're successful, managing it at the payment stage too. And if you're interested in proceeding further, then do contact and follow up with your county mentor. So thank you so much for listening. I hope there was something in it for everyone and that you got some benefit from giving up your time this morning. Thanks to 3CEA for organising it and promoting it, and SEAI for financially supporting it. There will be evaluation forms, so we'd love to hear your feedback, so that will help us design future events. And these slides will be circulated to everyone who's been in attendance this morning. And just to wish you every success with the grants that you might apply for going forward. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thanks for that very detailed presentation. Just a reminder to everybody, if there are any questions for Yvonne or on any of the grants that she's talked about, there's the chat group there. So if there are any questions, please add them in there. So I think thanks very much, Yvonne. You've outlined there, a large number of grant programs, and just from an SEC, the Sustainable Energy Community point of view, it's just really worth pointing out that your energy master plan for your SEC, for your community, can outline all of these great plans and projects for your community to become more sustainable as an overall community. It's not just about insulating your home and putting PV panels. It's about the whole community and renovation and upgrade of your whole community. So I think Yvonne has, I think a lot, or sometimes we think solely of the SEAI grants, the Better Energy Community grants and the insulation grants, etc. But I think Yvonne's given a great outline of all of the other grants that are there to help communities, you within your communities. So thanks very much for that, Yvonne. There's a few questions coming through there. So just a comment from William. Thanks, Yvonne, and well done.
Thanks, William.
And the same from Dan McInerney, thanks, very informative. So Imelda McCarthy question, hi, I lost you while you were telling us who to go to for an energy audit. Can you please outline that, Yvonne?
Okay, so for energy audits, certainly the Three Counties Energy Agency can assist you, or other consultants can support you either. You're very welcome to contact your county mentor first, talk about the project you have in mind, and then we can direct you on to get your energy audit. But that's a very good first step and a good place to start.
That's great, thanks, Yvonne. Julie Kavanagh here. Can you quickly say again where energy audit funding can be procured, please?
The Blackwater Village case study that I gave you, and other groups that I've seen in County Wexford, Kilteely as well, they would have got the energy audit funded as part of their town and village renewal grant application. So in Kilteely, for example, they got an energy audit funded, so that would have been at the 80% rate under town and village. That gave them the research and recommendations on how to upgrade their community centre, and then they would have then applied for a BEC grant to get replacements, whether it was a heating system, doors and windows, etc. So certainly through things like town and village, you can get an energy audit funded, or as Alex was telling me at the beginning, it is subsidised by local authorities. So the rate that I gave you, the 400 to 1200, is a subsidised rate that is available for communities. I know when I've been arranging them with Three Counties Energy Agency in the past, if you can group a number of geographical areas together, so they can be audited on the one day. Say if there's 3 that are in one location, that can help reduce the cost of the energy audits. I don't know, Alex, if you want to come in and say any more on that.
Yeah, I can do, but just I guess just so that there's no conflict of interest here between Three Counties Energy Agency and SEAI. SEAI have a list of registered energy auditors on their website. So if you're looking for an energy auditor, you can go onto the SEAI website, and there's a list of registered energy auditors. You can filter for regions and for counties, and find energy auditors within your region. And I would definitely, in all cases anyway, recommend a minimum of 3 quotes. So go to three energy auditors and get quotes, get prices for your specific building. I would recommend that for everybody in anything you do within your community anyway, any project. So a minimum of 3 quotes there. Just from our own point of view in the Energy Agency, we work with local authorities, and we work on the grants programs, and we can offer reduced rates to some of our communities thanks to that work that we do through our other programs. And absolutely, as Yvonne mentioned there, you know, we're always trying to reduce costs for the communities, obviously, because you know you can't go forward in a lot of the grant programs without these energy audits. So in one way we can reduce costs is if there's 2 or 3 or 4 communities in the same area, then we can travel on one day to visit more than one building, then that reduces travel costs for everybody, obviously. So that's definitely something we can do. But certainly what I would do, and I would highly recommend that you get a minimum of 3 quotes from energy auditors to make sure that you're getting the best value for money for your particular community. So just a question, Imelda, again, sorry, who is the county mentor? No problem. So there are 4 county mentors within the Southeast region, 3 Counties Energy Agency, so myself, and I'll give you my email address, and again, Mary, when she's forwarding the details of the slides to all of the participants, will include this, but my email address is ahamilton@3cea.ie, and we are the regional coordinators. So if there's any queries, that you can email me, and then with whichever county you're from, Carlow, Kilkenny, Wexford and Waterford are the 4 counties that we deal with in the southeast. So if you just send me an email as the county, as the regional mentor, I can pass you on to the specific county mentor. Yvonne is the county mentor for Waterford. Fiona is our county mentor for Wexford. Marina is the county mentor for Carlow, and Therese is the county mentor for Kilkenny. So those are our 4 county mentors. But if there's any queries from anybody, please feel free to send myself an email, ahamilton@3cea.ie, and Mary's just put it there up there in the chat group, and I can forward you on to the relevant county mentor. So that's great. I think we've gone through all the questions. Are there any other questions there before we finish up? That's great. So just if there, as well, if there were any other questions that people don't want to put in the chat group, again, please feel free to send me an email, and I can respond, or we can send it on to the relevant county mentor. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this morning. A reminder that Mary will forward on the slides and a link to the video of this webinar to all the participants, and that will be available to everybody. And a reminder of next week's webinar, which is the last of our webinar series, which is specifically about the match funding, or the other funding opportunities that Yvonne mentioned there. So that's specifically about finding your own funding sources to match fund the grants that may be available. So that's for next week. If you want to participate in that, again, contact Mary in 3CEA and book through the relevant links. So that's great. Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for attending.
Thank you.